Hello adventurers, today we'll be going over some stats within Diablo 4 to prepare for the launch. I went through the wiki and found some that I thought were unique, but some will be already commonplace from other Diablo games. I thought it would be a good time to have a little bit of a general overview of the different type of offensive, defensive stats, as well as the last part of the video will be ailments. So let's dive in. First, we're going to talk about core stats. The core stats are pretty general to Diablo-esque games. We're going to start with strength here. Strength is going to give armor to all classes, as well as it gives skill damage to barbarians and resource generation to rogues. Intelligence is going to give all resistance per point to all classes, and critical strike chance to rogues, as well as skill damage to sorceress. Willpower is going to increase healing received as well as overpower damage for classes that it applies. So healing overall or healing received to all classes, overpower damage to classes that it applies to. We'll talk about that in the offensive slides. For resource generation, that's going to be for barbarian with willpower as well as with sorceress. So willpower, resource generation for barbarian and sorceress. Dexterity is going to give all classes dodge chance, as well as critical strike to barbarian, skill damage to rogues, and critical strike chance to sorceress. So know the difference there between the three classes: skill damage to rogue, critical strike chance to barbarian and sorceress. So still probably a pretty good stat for a barbarian. I highly doubt sorceress is going to go into that. We'll talk about that on the offensive side, but I have a feeling that sorceress is going to be stacking in willpower and getting overpower as their third, like, secondary stat. And that overpowers what's going to be buffing their skills versus crit chance. But could be wrong there, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Dex isn't going to be very useful for sorceress. On to the core offensive stats. On that side, we're going to talk about the basic ones that are commonplace within Diablo games. We have attack speed, crit strike chance, critical strike damage. All three of these, exactly what they sound like. Attack speed, you attack faster. Crit strike chance, it's going to increase your critical strike chance. Do know that critical strikes deal base 50% bonus damage. So that's going to be, if it crits, it's going to be a 50% additional damage on top of the damage that a normal hit would have done. Additionally, there, damage over time cannot crit. This is pretty commonplace as well, but just know if you're going like a bleed build or something, bleeds will not crit. Additionally, here we have crit strike damage. Crit strike damage, again, is just extra damage on top of the normal hit that is affected by your crit strike chance on when you can critically strike. Again, the base damage here is going to be 50%, but if you get critical strike damage, increasing that number then increases based off that base amount. So if you have an additional 20% on your gear, you'd have 70% bonus damage versus 50%. Additionally here, be aware of conditional critical strike damage. When I was going through the wiki, and I did not list them here because that would be way too in-depth, there are a ton of class-specific as well as weapon type specific, elemental type specific, conditional crit strike damage that I saw on different items such as rings and weapons. So just make sure that if you have a ring that's like critical strike damage for fire, you're focusing on that element if you want to go that path. So just know that there is a lot of conditional critical strike damage in the game that you should be aware of. Overpower chance, a new stat that will only be available for Barbarian, Druid, Sorceress, and Necromancer. Now, the important thing to understand about Overpower is that when you cast a skill, it has a chance to overpower on these classes. When you hit a skill, it has a chance to overpower, right? The overpower chance just increases that, okay? And overpower will deal additional damage, so bonus damage to the sum of your current life and fortify. We'll go over fortify on the next page, where it's a shield that appears when your fortify is above your health. So won't dive into that right now. We'll talk about that on the defensive side, but just know that your life and fortify are added into your overpower damage. So the more life and fortify you have, the more overpower damage you will do. Okay, cool. Damage over time, passive abilities, and channel skills cannot overpower. Overpower damage. Again, very simple. The more overpower damage you stack, the additional extra damage that this grants when an overpowered attack or skill procs. Just remember to consider that your current life and fortified are considered within the overpower damage. On to another commonplace one that we see within Diablo is Thorns. Now, Thorns is just like it was before. It's any direct attack. Damage over time cannot apply a Thorns effect. So if you get a direct attack on you, then you will hit them with that amount of Thorns that you have. So an enemy hits you with the direct attack or skill, you would then hit them with Thorns damage. However, if they put a damage over time on you, that tick does not apply your Thorns. Vulnerable damage. On the vulnerable damage side, this is a new stat as well. This will increase the damage that an enemy takes. This is base 20% additional damage. So if you don't have any vulnerable damage, if you make them vulnerable, you would be doing an additional 20%. But if you stack your vulnerability damage, you would then be able to add that up. And finally here, one that I wanted to add on is lucky hits. This is a new stat as well, and something that was quite confusing to me that I felt warranted an explanation. If you do not have a piece of gear or a passive that says lucky hit effect, then that means that the skill is useless. This skill will do nothing for you unless you have an effect that it will be proccing, right? So you'll see on weapons and rings, as well as I believe some passives, that it says on lucky hit. If it's on lucky hit, then you want the lucky hit stat. If you don't have any effect, then you don't want lucky hit. So just an FYI there. Again, if you don't have a lucky hit effect from passives or on your armor, rings, weapons, whatever, then you do not want this stat. It does not do anything for you. On the core defensive side, we have life, armor, and resistances. This is the core trinity that we always see, and you're going to see a lot of similarities between these, but there is a few nuances. So life, again, is just your amount of health that you have. This is going to increase your life. Very simple. Life on gear increases your life. Armor, on the other side, is a little bit different, but still is that generic reduction in physical damage, as well as physical damage and bleeding damage over time. So the more armor you have does apply to bleeding damage, as well as physical. However, the new little nuance there is that non-physical damage taken is partially reduced by your armor contribution. All right. So with that, we'll segue into resistances. On the resistance side, armor contributes 50% of its value to your all resist. So the more armor you have, it's going to 50% of that is always contributing to your resistances. All right. Then on the top of that, you have your resistances for the specific types. These are fire, lightning, poison, shadow, and cold. The soft cap for your resistances for where you want to aim for until you start hitting major DRs is 75%. Okay, so just like in Path of Exile, you're going to want to hit that 75% resistance mark, and you can achieve that by going through with adding your additional specific resistances, as well as there is the all resistance stat as well that would apply to all the resistances listed here. Just put a note here for the world tier. World tiers 1 through 3 start with a negative 20% to your all resist. Going up to world tier 4 and 5 will increase that by 40%. Another one that's pretty commonplace, but is a little bit different in the functionality of it in Diablo 4 versus Diablo 3 is life regeneration. Life regeneration recovers X percentage of life per second. However, taking damage will disable this effect for 4 seconds. So this means essentially you have to be out of combat for 4 seconds for life regen to take effect. Dodge is another new stat. It is when you dodge an attack, you take no damage, as well as any harmful effect that that attack could potentially inflict will not be applied. Now, if a damage over time effect does get applied to you, you have no chance to dodge that damage over time effect. And finally, the one that I had mentioned on the offensive page for overpower is Fortify. This is available for Barbarian, Druid, and Necromancer. And when your fortified stat is greater or equal to your life, you will gain a shield. So say you had 40 fortified, but you had 120 life. You won't see any shield. There is no shield on you. There's nothing. You just see your life. However, when you go below that 40 health to 39, you will gain a 40 shield of fortified, making you have 70 essential life or like health pool, right? So the fortified will not be effective until your life goes below that threshold. Additionally, when you're fortified, your character takes 10% reduced damage. I'm going to jump to the last page here. Now, this is the ailments. So first here, we're going to start with some basics. We're going to start with burning. Burning is just damage over time. Now, something with burning is that it does benefit from fire damage buffs. So if you have additional fire damage, that will buff your burning damage. However, additional burning damage will not buff your fire skills. So chilled, again, is just like it sounds. It's going to reduce the enemy's movement speed and stack. I could not find a specific number of stacks that were required for an enemy to be chilled. All right. So after a certain amount of time of applying chill to your enemy, they will become frozen. Frozen means that the enemy cannot move or attack. Frozen is essentially a stun. Daze is a little bit different. Dazed, I thought, would be just a slow, but this is actually, in fact, acting more as a blind. Dazed enemies cannot attack or use skills, but they can still move. So they will be moving at the same speed. However, they cannot attack. So just know that Dazed is essentially blind from Diablo 3. Fear is the next one here. It prevents attacks, skills, and causes the target to run in a different direction. Immune, exactly what it sounds like. It's going to prevent all damage, negative effects on you. Anything can't take any damage. It's going to negate and prevent that. Another interesting one is Unstoppable. Unstoppable, as far as I understand, is only available for Barbarian and Druid. I did not list it here because I'm not 100% on that. But Unstoppable removes impairing effects. So any type of movement impairing effect, stun, you can go unstoppable with your skills. That skill will then take you out of that. It was really actually fun playtesting the Druid. It was interesting to see that even though I was stunned, I still could use an unstoppable skill. That skill would then make me get out of that stun. So it was a nice little break of that CC. Berserking is another very niche one. This is specific to Barbarian only. And this will allow them to do additional 25% damage and 25% movement speed. There is plenty of ways to get berserking on the Barbarian tree. When playtesting this, I played a berserking bleed build. I really liked it. It was super fun. You were running around. You had a couple skills that made you unstoppable, and you were just really fast and mobile. Movement skills for Barbarian, and I'll talk about that in the Barbarian guide, but for Barbarian, movement speed I found was very necessary, as it is very flat-footed, and the movement skills themselves don't feel so great. It's not that they're terrible, but definitely having that movement speed was really nice. All right, Barrier. For Barrier, this is going to be specific, I believe, to Sorceress, and this is just like a mana shield. So this is an additional shield when you use this spell, or it's a passive that it gets procced. You get an additional shield on top of your health pool that will help you with survivability absorbing damage. Blood Orbs is specific to Necromancers. This is going to be their survivability mechanic. When you use a blood spell, it has a chance to spawn a blood orb. Taking up that blood orb heals you, as well as I believe there's some passives that give you like extra armor, resistances, stuff like that. So just know that that's a survivability mechanic specifically to Necromancer. And then finally, Crackling Energy. This was a question mark one for me. I believe this is specific to only the Sorceress, but this increased periodic damage nearby enemies when picked up. Extra terms to know. These were conditions that I didn't really understand the terminology for, so I wanted to review that with you guys. The first one I have here is Close. Close means that you're in melee range. Distance means you're outside of melee range. Healthy is the next one here, and it means that you're over 80% health, and injured means you're below 35% health. These were important just in my mind because a lot of the conditions they mentioned when close, when healthy, when injured. So that's everything from my side. I know this was a little bit more in depth. I tried to keep it quick. I hope it wasn't too boring. Um, Please let me know how I can improve the videos. I would love to make more content like this. So definitely let me know what content you guys like. And hopefully today's launch goes smoothly. We only have 4 hours to go. So look forward to seeing you guys in Diablo 4, and thank you for watching.